Today I'm showing you how to make a 3-stone ring, and I designed a way to make it as quickly and as easily as possible so you can do as good a job as you possibly can in the shortest amount of time. This ring has just 3 parts and then you're adding 6 claws and that's it, it's finished, it's ready for setting. So let's get on with it. Now obviously your centre stone is going to go right in the middle of that, so go ahead and drill a hole in it. Preferably use a sharp drill, which I am not. Come on. Come on. Now what you do is you open up that hole so your stone sits right down. This is the, where's that ring? This is the top plate we're making. So you want the stone to sit reasonably low. Not so the girdle's right down on the surface, but the higher you go, the more the stone's going to stick up on someone's finger. So I like to get it quite low. I like it so the cue is down in that bottom collet. Here's my plate. I've cut it right out. I used my saw frame to cut out a big circle out of it because it was so big. See, my stone goes right through. Now that cue is going to hopefully dip into the bottom plate, and obviously I don't want it to come out the bottom of the ring. So where this is quite a steep curve as well, I had to stretch out the sides a little bit just so the stone sits in there nicely. Without doing that, there was a bit of a gap either side. So that's my hole, I'm leaving it like that. Now I'm gonna do the second ones. Now here you have to pay a bit more of attention to your accuracy, because you want the stones to sit just so either side of that. Obviously they've got to be in a straight line, but you want them tucked right up to that centre stone, but obviously not touching it. With it in mind that you want your stones directly opposite each other, I'll put a line there. And yes, it would have been easier to draw that line before drilling that hole. Never mind. That's what happens when you work in a rush. I'm not thinking ahead. So, on that line, I'm gonna have my stone there. Get one of your side stones. You can rub beeswax on there and then your stones will stick. I tend to not bother. So just have a look. Put the stones on there and have a look. It'll give you a guide where you want it to land. So you want that stone tucked right up next to the centre stone, but obviously not touching it. So you can have a look. What you can even do, looking directly down on it. It's nice when the edge of that side stone tucks under the centre stone. I just put a little line at the central point of that centre stone. That gives me a guide where to drill my hole. Once the hole is drilled, plenty of opportunity to move it around. You can, with your phrases, you can drag it up closer or further away, but at least you've got that good guide now. So I've got my mark on that metal. I just follow that up. I've got a little cross on there now, so that's where my hole is, and I'll do the same distance the other side. But I will drill that one first, open it up a little bit, check I like where it's sitting compared to the centre stone, and then I'll move on to the other one and make that the same. Opening up the side holes a little bit. So there's my side stone, just sat in there. And if I can get them to sit in straight, you can see the edges are just under the centre stone. So I'm going to drop it down a little bit more and then do the same the other side. And then we're going to be cutting around the stones and filing it up to almost where we want it to finish. I'm going to file it up to where the edges of the metal disappears under the stone, so when you're looking down on it you can't see any metal. So next step for me, lowering this one, opening up the other side to match that, and then we're cutting it out. I've lowered my stones into the plate now. That's what mine looks like. Don't forget to check with your saw frame how straight they are. Just put it directly top and bottom over your center stone, and then look how it's lining up over your side ones. Mine's pretty good. So you want them no gaps in between the stones. The edge of that stone should sit under the girdle of that one. If I can, I'm going to show you it from the side. Just to show you from the side, you want the stones up very close underneath the girdle of the center stone, but certainly not touching it. So you've got your stones in the top plate and you like the height they're sitting. Next step we're going to do is cut around them. So what I do is I quickly draw a line sort of around the stones, and then I know where I should not cut past. And then you end up with this kind of 3 circles shape in a line. I cut it out really badly just to give me less work for filing. Use your dividers, draw lines using what you phrased out, draw lines around so you've got a nice perfect curves to follow, and then get it so that line just disappears under the edge of the stone. And we're going to be filing it back a little bit more once it's in the ring, but get it so it's just disappeared when you're looking down on it. Because obviously, certainly you don't want that a ring finished and then see metal around it. That's a horrible thing to happen. So have the metal so it's just disappeared, all 3 stones. So I'm filing around it now. Use your like tri-square, or I've got a square one here. Get it up to your lines you divided. What I do is I get my saw frame and I cut down, if I can hold on to this. Well, your line's going to a point in between the stones, you can cut up to it, and then you haven't got to think too much about your corner of your needle file going down into the correct position. Get that one a bit closer. There's no reason why you couldn't have just gone from your plate with the holes in straight to dividers. I don't know why, it's just certain ways you do things and don't change. I sort of cut up to it and then I use my dividers and then get more accurate. Another good tool to use are these little cut-off discs you can get for your pender motor. It's like a little stone grinder disc. Very delicate, no flex at all, so you've got to be careful with them. But they're great for getting into those little corners. So I will be using this. Update, getting closer now. That stone just disappears there, and then this one is kind of gone around the outer edge, but I can still see metal in between, like that kind of edge either side of my aqua. So I'm going to file that, take that little V cut out in more, and then reduce the circumference around the outer one. It's important to keep them really circular as well, just for looks of the finished ring. And obviously when the stones are in there, you don't want this big flat section there. But we're doing it, we're cutting away the minimum. So at least there's no metal above the stones, but when that's in the shank, we're going to be filing around the outsides more. So we're basically doing it to this level, and that will give us a bit of space to work on it more further down the line. Been tickling the metal a little bit more around the outside, so I'm quite happy with that. I can't see metal around the edges of any stones now when I look directly down on it. Just to show you what it looks like. So I've got that. Again, this big flat section here, that's going to be reduced before it's finished, but I've taken away what definitely needs to be taken away, but also have given myself space to work on it further. So next stage, what we're doing next, we're doing the shank next. So for the shank, we are doing a tap up shank. It goes up. So here's, it's going to be D section going around there, and then this is flattened to a point. So if you're looking at that, it's going to look like that shape. For the shank, mill out a bit of metal. Basically, we're going to be hammering it on the ends to stretch up the distance we got. So this is a squarish bit of metal, and what's that, 2.76, yeah, 2 3/4 square. What I'm going to do is mill out the middle section, just flatten that slightly, because obviously I don't need my shank to be that thick. I'll probably go down to like 1.6 or 7. I'll take my metal, put it in, go down half, and just squash it, and then roll it backwards and forwards. Don't go right to the ends. Squash it down a bit more. You take it out, have a look, see how far I need to bring this end across a little bit. Getting started now. I'm going to leave about 8mm either side untouched. I've milled mine out that much. You can see the flat section down the centre, which is what I've squashed flat. Leaves a strange kind of shape, and it's just a head start. So when I wrap that around my ring stick, there's less filing to do. The way I go about this, get this started, so you've got a bit of metal, anneal that, get it nice and soft. Start, give the thicker bits a bit of a curve. We're going to turn that up into a perfect circle and solder it up, because it makes it much easier to get your shank perfectly round when it's soldered up, and you can just bang it on the stick, rather than making a kind of U shape and trying to get the perfect circular inner circumference on it for the ring. And then once you've got the head in the shank, you don't want to be bashing it hard as well. So my preference is to get the shank perfectly round, and then cut it and open it up again, and then we'll put the head in. So make sure it's not twisting, just turn it up. Doesn't have to be perfect, but get it as circular as possible. Alright, that's close enough. I'm going to cut the ends flat, get a nice join, then solder it up. Right, so you should have something like this. If you've been banging it on the ring stick, nice and circular inside, and from about there to there, it starts thickening up. And now this one we're going to hammer to stretch it up that way to get a bit more height on there. Anneal it again, and yeah, start banging away on the top half. So not just flattening it, I'm tilting it at an angle, so get it on the edge of your block. And then hammering it with this kind of motion of stretching it up, just trying to get it to spread out that way. Your solder joint is your center, so go either side of that. And turn it over. Keep looking at it from the side, making sure you're evenly tapering it across both sides. Give it a bit more, anneal it every now and again. You don't have to go too far with this, so it shouldn't take long. This is what mine looks like. I bashed it up a bit more, just to give you some numbers. Just to give you some numbers, I've got, at the highest point, 3.5. Once you've stretched that up to about that number, get it on your ring stick again, bang it round, tap it flat, back of the shank. Now remember, it's not going to be that high in the ring, but that's quite rounded on the inside, so that's going to be filed flat. You need a bit of space on the distance to file the top and just work on the ring in general. So yeah, stretch it up more than you plan it to finish at. And it should look evenly tapering to a center point from the top. So let's file that up a little bit and then we'll split it open. When I do this, I get a big coarse file. Hold it, just filing only the sides of the shank and holding the stretched shoulders part of the ring. Ideally this is a very small size because remember it's going to be opened up, so that head's going to sit in it. So I've actually made this probably a bit too big. Here's a bit of guesswork when you're milling out that centre section. You don't need as long a bit of metal as you might imagine. So I'll flip that over. Do it on the other side as well. It's still really wide. Very hot. Now double check your shank tapers kind of neatly to the middle. It doesn't have to be super accurate, but it has to be quite accurate because you're going to file it now. You don't want to be doing all the filing on one side to try and correct it. So I'm just holding, that angle would be the flat of the side of the shank, and then I'm just tilting that slightly. Do the same the other side. Let's have a look from the top, double check what's going on. Need to do this corner a bit more. You should have something a bit like that. Now, I'm going to file out the inside, get that all nice and flat, and then tidy up the shank a little bit around the outside. I'm going to de-off the back of that, and then we'll open it up. I've got my ring now, I've filed out the inside, and it's important to do the inside first because then you've got this nice sharp corner and flat inner surface, and you can use that as a guide to get the outside perfect. So I'll just flatten it off around the outside first of all, and get all my sort of hammering marks out of it. Don't go right up to the top because we want to leave that as tall as possible. When we're paying a bit more attention, we'll work on that. So just gently, with a nice coarse file, just flattened it. Now I want this shank to be D section, so if you cut through it, it would look like a capital letter D, flat on the inside and rounded on the outside. To start that off, just tilt my file, just taking the corner off. and I can use the flat on the side as a guide to get that the same all the way around. Should be a nice parallel line. Again, I'm not going to touch the top too much because we're still going to take a bit of meat off the shoulders of that. I'm really making that nicely rounded around the outside. For some reason, you could do this with any flat on a big file, but for some reason I like doing it with my ring file. I think it's kind of narrower, so it's just nice and easy to maneuver. So I'm literally, as well as going this way, I'm rolling it side to side. So it's got this motion and this motion, and I'm concentrating on the corner nearest me rather than trying to go over both sides, so I can really see what's going on. I can't, my peg's not very nice at the moment for working. So just making sure that's nice and even all the way around, and I'm getting a nice curve there. Turn it over and just do the same other side. It's not a lot of work, you're just rounding off any kind of flats you've put on it. It's a weird motion, but once you've done it a few times, you stop thinking about it. And then after I've done this side, that side, I go kind of doing the same thing, but down the middle, just very light. And I think that will do. We may as well start off the shoulders a little bit. So I'm just getting those nice and neat. So let's cut it open. Don't worry about what your solder joint is doing. Obviously, it was important that your solder joint is there down the middle, because you don't want to have a join there or there, because it can just balls you up a little bit. Also, it's just a nicer quality thing. If you're working directly into gold, it's nice if you've got your shank on the correct size and you didn't have to size it. Because if there's no join in it, it's more like a brand new piece. So yeah, cut it down the middle, which will be over your join, but it's not essential you're really following the line of it. So cutting down towards the center of the ring. Now this, like, be careful with it. You don't want to twist it or bang it around too much. You want to keep it basically this shape. But I'm going to pull it open. Oh, this ring's way too big. Pull it open, and the head we made earlier has got to be able just to sit in there, and then the shank stay in that position. So you're going to have to push it up your ring stick and give it a tap, because obviously you can see how this does not flex as easily as that, so it's holding on to its original curvature a little bit tighter. Let's give that a bang. See, that's why I mentioned not to worry about working on the shoulders too much, because they're going to get bashed about and filed up a little bit. And we have to stretch the ring up to get this gap rather than taking away the shank, because obviously you're taking away that metal, you're losing the height. You want to keep that now. So now I've got two parts finished. Before you move on, make sure your shank sits nice and flat. Make sure it tapers off evenly both sides towards the center, not more one side than the other. A clue of what's going on there is looking at that end piece. Is it a nice kind of triangle tapering up? We're going to be taking a bit of weight off the sides of these shoulders because they're too chunky and a bit ugly, but I'll do that once the head is in position, because then you're sort of working to what looks right rather than guessing what it might look like in the future. Now you want this opened up, so it just fits in, and there's a bit of a step down from the highest point in the shank, and then that fits in there, and then it should be, as it sits flat, should be nice and even both sides. I hope you can see that when it's shiny, it doesn't show up too easily on the camera. But my shank, I might squeeze it down a little bit more, but I want it just to sit there, and then that shank should just stay in that position, not when I'm squeezing it with my fingers, it's correct. It should just stay there. So needle it if you have to, just get it to stay there and be flat and all nice and even all the way around. So that's the distance we want. So I've just got this rough bit of plate, a little bit of sheet, and give you some numbers. 104. I might mill that down to 0.9 of a mil. I don't want it that thick because then it's taking up space in there. Yeah, I'm going to mill it out to 0.9, and then what I'm going to do is curve it, just nice parallel curve to exactly the same curvature as that. So obviously I'll just put that on a ring stick, see what it is, and then curve that so it's the same, and then we're going to solder it in there. Tapping that in a swage block. When you do that, make sure it's perfectly straight, because if it's tilted and then you put the shape in it, it's going to be twisted in the ring. So what I did is I did it in one that was too small, and then got it up to the size I wanted, and then just gave it a tap so it sits nicely at the curvature I want. And hopefully I can show you this. That should be the same curve, and I'm going to solder it in there. So without any banging about, once that's soldered in there, it's just going to sit there perfectly. Get one end perfectly flat. Then what I do is I just hold that up to that wall. You want those walls touching, that's flat, and they go together perfectly, not like all gappy one side. Hold it close as you can in position. Just give it a little mark, a little bit longer than what you need, just so you don't cut it too short. Make that a bit clearer if you need to. Cut it off. So I've gone a bit crazy with the width of that. I don't need that much width at all, but I'm just thinking about the length. Got one side flat, the other side parallel. It should just sit in there like just so. I'm going to take a little bit more off, but try and be as accurate as you can and get that under edge to match that under edge and just line up just perfectly. And that saves you a lot of filing. You don't want that up the shank and then you've got to file the shank away to make it line up. That kind of ruins it, because then you've got to match the other side and then it's not round and you've got into a mess. And then you don't want that sticking out downwards either, because then you've got to file all this away. Then it starts going thin, it's going to look sort of tapered. You're going to have to match it the other side, and then you've got to start reshaping it again, you get in a mess. So try and get it really perfect. Use a loop if you have to. And if everything's straight and all lined up, you should just be able to get it to sit in there. It should be easy to solder. I've got all my parts of my ring together, 1, 2, 3, plus the stones. Now we're checking the fitments. Now it's important to that bottom plate. It's got to be a nice parallel curve. The ends have got to be straight, parallel with each other. Looking at it in position from the side, that inner edge has to line up perfectly with the bottom edge of your shoulders. And then putting the top plate on, it should sit in there just so there's a little step down from the top of the shoulder down to the top plate. And then when it's in position and soldered in, ideally that's exactly the same both sides. Everything is nice and straight. Look at it down from the top, should be perfectly in line with the shoulders of the shank. Looking at it from the side, should be nice and straight, not tilted, not down one side or the other. So when you're happy with how everything fits, your shank should just be able to put it down and it stays in that position. Not you can get it everything how you want it to fit when you're squeezing it in your fingers. It should just be staying in that position. Double check your shank, put it down on the metal block, make sure it's nice and flat. Pick up your saw frame, have a look at put it over the top, side to side. Is it a nice straight line? Are the angles of your shoulders, the ends of them, are they even? You can even use your digital calipers. Check the measurements, the tops of your shoulders. This is how I go about doing the next stage, soldering together. Hold that in my tweezers. Then I've got a slot in my bench peg. Hold that directly up. Take my bottom plate. Try not to drop it. And if you cut everything nicely and everything's fitting well, just line it up down the middle and it should just sit in position. Might need to fiddle with that a little bit, but basically that's just going to sit there and I'll solder it in. Next step, now that's soldered in. Remember earlier on in the video I asked you to curve that at a more steep curve than your finger size. That's because now that should just sit on the ends of the shank and make that gap in between it. A nice sort of crescent moon gap there from the side. So same again, just like you just did with the bottom plate, do the same with the top plate. You've got that bottom plate soldered in. Now set it back up so it's holding there vertically again. This is my tip for doing the next bit. This top piece, because the ends are rounded and the ends of the shoulders are quite sharp, when you put that in it's prone to rocking left or right. So what I do is get a little bit of metal, something that fits in that gap. Ideally it's got a bit of a flat on it and then it just sits in the middle nicely. So that'll just sit there like that. That's not going to be soldered in, but what it does, it just helps hold this piece in position. So there you go, I can just confidently have that sitting there nice and straight now, and that's stable for soldering. So you want to set this up very carefully. You're looking at the angles of it that way, and then also it may twist like this way. You'll get it just right. You want it sitting straight, perfectly straight before you solder it. Don't have one side looking very good and then think, okay, I'll solder that and then I'll move the other side, because then you're twisting it, you're putting stress on the join you just made, and you're risking just ballsing it up. So get it perfect. When it's lined up well and you're happy with it, put flux on both joins and then heat it up gently, and then the side you solder first, the flux will boil obviously on the other side as it gets hot, and it will act like a kind of glue to hold it in position for you for soldering. So be very gentle. It's much better to take your time and line it up perfectly before soldering anything. I'm going to shift this side up a little bit. I've got to move my camera out of the way first, and then I'm going to solder that in. So now you've soldered your top plate in. Have a look over it. Is it nice and flat there? You've got this nice T shape looking up the shank and the top of that bezel. Is your gap nice and even? The tallest part should be directly in the middle, and then either end should be the same. This ring still needs a lot of adjustment. We certainly don't want this big flat under the stone, so this is going to be brought right in. This is why I said try to make it kind of accurately, but leave this rough, because we're still going to be working on that quite a lot. What we're doing next is what I do is I scratch a line around the collet, and then I cut that off quite quickly, and then using the file we're going to file right up to that really accurately. And then also it's not just going parallel down, it's going to be tapering in, so it'll look much nicer. So we're going to file it minimum that, but then we're taking it in nice and evenly all round all three stones. So keep it in mind, you don't want to hit the back of your shank with your saw blade or that top. Just carefully cut up close to it. Show you exactly what I'm doing. Put my saw blade in the little V between the two stones and then line it up so the blade is going down to the centre of the ring. Put a little nick in without going so far as to hit that top plate. There's still a lot of work to be done. So I get my half round, again line it up. I'm not filing the top or the back of the shank, just taking the metal away. So that saw cut lets me file with a big file confidently, and as you can see, that was the last corner. As you can see, it kind of looks like it's taken shape already underneath, and I've made no effort to really be accurate. It's just that I put that saw cut in the correct position, and it was easy to do, just in that groove and then towards the centre, and cut down, and then just file it back. So I've made a bit of progress now, going quite close. I'm going to move on to my 3 square and then go around it, taking that in quite a lot more, and should start to touch that top plate now. Onto my needle files now. When you're doing the filing into the groove, remember that corner blade just going up and down at the angle you want, which is where the claw's going to sit. Don't file it like that and then expect to be able to put your claw on nice and neatly that way. Just file that way. So the file is going up and down across the centre of the ring at that angle. So what I'm doing is I'm thinking that way and then just tilting it in slightly because that's where I want it to end. Same this one. And as this one comes in and lowers, my file will start to touch the bottom half of that. And I'm going to have a look, but I'm going to bring this in a little bit as well. That is the maximum size because it had just disappeared under the edge of the stone. I may even lower the stone a touch more because when I'm trying it in there, I want the culet of the stone to come down a little bit. I want it to sit in between there and there, obviously not coming out the bottom, but I don't like it when a stone is set and you can see the point in the middle. I just think it should have been set lower. So it shows nice control of your diamond mounting skills if you can get the point just to sit just in there. If you get these grooves in the correct position, just keep filing around, and I'm not even really thinking about the bottom plate too much, but as you can see, it's taking shape quite nicely, and I'm not checking that and making sure it's going okay. I'm just following that curve because we made that correct earlier, and then where our saw cuts have gone in and these angles are correct, it just kind of works out. I made it easy for myself by always working accurately previously. And then you end up with a nice, neat finished piece because you didn't have to keep correcting mistakes as you went along. I've now filed the sides of the ring to get it to this stage, so kind of approaching what I want it to end up as. So now I'm gonna file out the inside so I can take the accuracy of it to the next level. Be careful with your file not to tilt it this way or this way too much, because you don't want one side of your bottom plate to look thinner than the other side. all the way across, both sides, the same. Zing it out. Keep it parallel. These cylinder, paper, rotational cylinder things, whatever they're called, a whizzer, that's the technical name for it. These are so much better than the old school split mandrel types, because you've got this flapping about, and they have the uses, hence I have one with really coarse paper on it, but that edge that flapping will take away the sharpness around the edges of your piece. So this one's great because it stays really flat. So now I've got I can really see the outline of what I've filed up there. What should I do next? Should I drill it out? No, I'm not going to drill it out now. Yeah, what I'm going to do is, I'll tell you what, I'm going to drill out the center one and then get my stone sitting in its perfect position where I want it to be set. Because I want the cule of it, I think it's still a little bit high. I'm going to get it to lower down slightly so it just sits in that lower bezel. What you may already know from working on it when you're making that top plate, because of that curvature, to get that stone lower, you actually have to cut a kind of oval shape, like I'm bringing it out more on the sides. I've got to take away just the top section to get it to sit lower. That's the only place it's touching. The only part it's touching is there and there. So I've got to take metal out either end, which gives you a kind of oval shape. But that doesn't mean I want oval shape around the outside. That's staying round to match the circumference of the stone. I've got my stone sat at the height I want now. Great. Unfortunately, I've upset the balance of the difference in height between the side stones and that centre stone. So I need to reduce these, which I like the look of anyway. I'm going to reduce the side stones. They've got to go right down in height. Not a problem, but it's something that obviously needs to be done before moving forward. So keep checking your stones and making sure as you lower them, they're going to land at the correct position. Not too far away, not too far under. Remember, you've got two claws going in between, and the stones, when it's set, there's going to be a cutting in the claw, quite a big cutting for the big stone, and then lower down on the opposite side is going to be cut for the side stones to go in. So there's got to be a definite height difference. Be busy lowering that middle stone and then the side stones to match it. Remember, when you're lowering things either side of the center stone, you're lowering them down at that angle, not at that angle. So as you lower it, eventually they would all meet in the middle. So you've got to pull it out a little bit as you lower it. I mean, it's really fractional amounts, but you've certainly got to do it. You keep looking at it from the side, you're going to have to keep an eye on the distances between them. Also, one of my side stones had a bit of a bigger belly on it than the other one, so it was sitting up higher. So what I did is I put a dot on the ring and a dot on the stone, so I could make just one side specific for that stone. So I'm going to need that for setting. And now they sit both at the same height and flat and look good. I'm going to reduce the outside of that a little bit because I moved the stone out this way, so a little bit of metal is showing there. So I'm going to work on the outside of that again a little bit. It's nice to have that flat edge gone as well. Not completely, because people wear, especially on there and there, because people wear rings next to other rings and then it's going to be touching under the stone there. So if that's razor thin from new, it's going to look worn out straight away. People are probably going to complain because they'll come back 6 months to a year later and that top edge will be breaking away. So it's nice to have a bit of strength there, but it's also nice not to have a big flat under the stone. Been filing away, and it would be great if you could get tweezers with kind of very fine teeth inside, so when you hold stuff it doesn't keep moving about like that. Anyway, ran over. So I've been filing mine up, and I've got it to that stage, kind of round, still not 100% accurate. You don't have to worry too much about getting these really nice and sharp, because we're about to use a phrase and zing right in there to start putting our claws on. But before we do that, let's just clean this up a little bit. And what I use is one of these. I don't know if you can buy something similar, but I've always just made these. You just get a, where'd this come from? I think, oh, this is one I bought in Japan, but you can make them like this whizzer thing I was talking about earlier. That is quite an easy metal to cut. If you finish one of these, just literally just cut down about 1 centimetre, and then you can coil up a little bit of paper and put it in there. So you're making a mini one of those paper whizzer mandrel things, and then use that to go around the sides, and then that just gets rid of your file marks. When you've got claws on a ring, this is quite a good thing to use as well, because you're putting marks, you're putting lines on it across, and then when you're polishing it, you're holding it that way. So it's good for polishing out any marks, because you're polishing the opposite direction, so the little lines that are on there. There's a lot of burrs on those edges now. Now might be a good time to get rid of those before you put the claws on. So let's put the claws on. Ring. Now my stone is huge. What is it exactly? It's just over 8 mil. If that was a diamond, mega money. Forget about it. Right. What are we talking about? Yeah, claws. Because my stone is big, you want to have a slightly heavy claw anyway, because you're cutting into it to set the center stone, and then cutting the other side of it to set the outer stones. So go quite a heavy gauge. Because my stone is big, I can get away with a sort of an extra heavy gauge. But it doesn't look odd. This bit of metal is 1.2. So now I know that my metal is 1.2. I'm going to select a phrase which is less than 1.2, 1.1, or even 1 mil to start it off. Again, phrasing directly into that corner, and then going, same line we cut it, same line we filed it, that way, go into the center. Just keep doing that, can't go wrong. And then moving it inwards, I will be going in a little bit, putting the stones on, seeing how the gap is when I look directly down on the ring, and then imagining the claw in its position. Yeah, I won't have to go in too far, to be honest. But yeah, be careful doing this. Don't go in too far, because then setting it, you want the claws to be straight when they're set. They're just cut. Just cut that little groove into it so the stone can sit in that groove. You don't want to have to bend the claws out to set the stones, because that's basically a wrong size mount, that's what that means. Or the claws are in the wrong position. Okay, no, I bought that. I forgot. We didn't drill it out yet. Sorry, I've just been for lunch and I forgot where we were. So next is drilling out. Zip, zip, zip. Do it. No, I didn't really feel it needed too much explanation, but just to show you anyway how I do it. Ball phrase. You're only going to see the exit hole, so make sure the back of it looks good. I've already got the centre of this middle stone. And then I'm literally just going to drill from this side, so I know it's going to come out all right. Don't have to, but that's just what I'm going to do. If you give yourself an extra bit of length on the drill piece, you can hold it more vertically, because that's not hitting the side of the shank of the ring. Also, you can drill a bit from that side, drill a bit from that side. Oh my God, did you see that? That was the worst thing that's ever happened to me. On this day. Why all of my drills seem to be blunt lately? I would recommend starting off with a thinner drill and then opening up the hole. I've gone a little bit quite a thick one straight away. I can't use this drill. Three holes. Now I'm going to open up the side ones a little bit, not too much, but then this middle one I'm going to open right up. Obviously the more you open it, the more strength you're taking out of the ring. So I like to leave it a little bit chunky. I'm leaving mine like that because just as how I want it to look. There's an element of design that's up to you. You can open it up however you want, but just keep in mind the strength of the ring. The more you take out, the more weak it's going to get. Now I'm going to find one of my finer needle files. There's one in particular I want, which due to the law of the universe means it will vanish. Oh, there it is. Doing some heavy filing on it, so you've got a lot of burrs on the inside. So just knock those off. If you were working in platinum, I would have had that all polished and nice inside before putting the top on. Then when people look at the finished thing, they can see it's all clean out inside and they can appreciate it's a high quality handmade piece of jewellery. Done. So let's do the claws. Where was I? I had that one, this one. A phrase slightly thinner than what your claw is going to be, because you may not like its position, and then if it's thinner, it gives you a chance to move it, and then the claw will fit in. Or if you do like where it is, you just open it up a little bit and the claw slots in. So following the angle of the side of the ring, following that angle, and then obviously going down from that edge to the centre. Just phrase it out. Making sure the position on top is where you want it to be. Once I've cut in there a little bit, I'll put my centre stone on and one of the side stones. Just have a look down on it, and then you can see, use some magnification. I've just got this watchmaker's ×2 loop I use a lot for this. Because ×10 is great, but it's almost too close. I wanna be able to see the whole thing just slightly magnified. So yeah, where that is now is pretty good. I would be able to set the stones with that. I can see how much of the stone is sticking out over the hole. Obviously that's where I'm going to have to cut the claw. I think that's good. I'm going to, quicker than I thought. I thought I would have had to go in a bit more. So just replicate that on the opposite side and then check the stones again, see if I like it. I'll tell you what, I wish I had a video guide like this when I was learning. I just had these old men scrawling on bits of paper trying to explain stuff to me. Alright, can you see the grooves? note the grooves I've cut that the claws will sit in. So the centre stone is sitting above the side stone. Can you see how the stones just stick over the edge of either one? That means that claw will be straight and the stones will be able to be set in it. That's kind of what you're aiming for. So there, see my round claw will set the blue stone and it will set the white stone as it sits in position being straight. So you may need to make a few small adjustments to get the distances right. Then you should technically be able just to slot it in there, slide it up, and your claws sit straight, straight. They're just in there, ready to solder. Where's my stone? Having a close look, it should sit in the centre, touching both claws. When you've got the other side on, that stone will now no longer sit back in its position because the claws are slightly closer than the girdle. So you cut into the girdle and then you can get it back down there again. So you simply make two of these U shapes exactly the same as each other and then get them to fit. You might be lucky and they just both slide in there and line up really nicely, but my one needs a bit of adjustment. Like, don't just solder them in how they naturally sit, like double check, turn the ring around, make sure you like the angles, and certainly they are straight. Get your measuring gauge. I've got 278 one side, 272 the other side, so I'm just going to reduce this one. And of course you can't just squeeze the claws together, the claws have to stay as they are. You just adjust your gap. I'm just using my drill, unfortunately. It should work. There we go. When you make things, don't just charge ahead assuming everything's correct. You need to check and look. Okay, so they are straight now. Okay, 272 and 276. It's close enough. Just a few hundredths of a mil, I think we'll get away with that. So now my stone, technically, it should touch all four claws and just hold there. Up high, which it does. So once that's set, it will push right down. So now put a side stone on and it should be touching both claws. Next claw we're putting on is there. So put it in a position where it's going to force the stone to have to be cut into it. So it sits there. Basically mine is right on the top of the shoulder. Just have a look from the other side. Yeah, that should work quite well. I'm going to put one right at the end of the shank. Possibly just going over the edge slightly, but that's going to work. Which is good, because that looks neat, both sides then. The way I'll do that. Get a ball phrase. Just touch it where I'm going to put the claw on. Open it up with a small drill, probably like 1 mil. and then maybe a bigger drill, enough for the claw to sit in. I don't want to just plonk a claw on there, that's not strong. You've got to set it into the metal. Because remember, with setting, you're going to be putting pressure on that claw, it's going to be pushed about a little bit, so it's got to be strong. I don't think soldering it just on there with a flat on the end will be strong enough. Soldered these on. I didn't give you any advice on soldering, because if you're making a 3-stone, I'm assuming you can solder. So I'm about to shorten these claws now. If you're working in gold or platinum, don't make massive long claws like I have, it's a waste of metal. But I'm doing a master as usual in silver. So it's a cheap metal, you can afford to be a bit slapdash. The U-shapes underneath, carefully get your saw blade in there and then saw those off, obviously without nicking the ring in any position. I think now is a good time to adjust the shoulders. I like to put the claws on first before doing the shoulders, because you get a sense of the balance of the ring when it's finished. Taking a bit of weight off there and there. Be careful with it, especially if you made one in silver like me. You could catch that with a tooth of your file and possibly bend it. So I'm just filing the shoulder, I'm not going to the very top. I don't want to lose any height where it goes up to the end. I'll do one side so you can see the difference and how it looks. Can you see the difference? Look, I've brought this edge up a little bit. I might even do a little bit more and then taken weight off there. See, that looks really chunky and just a bit ugly. This has a lot more finesse. So the ring, that's a nice ring there. And then that is not a nice ring. Okay, so now you've got your ring done. I want you to mark directly at the bottom. It doesn't have to be exactly, but just as a guide. And doing this is what takes you to the next level. From being a mediocre jeweler to a very good one. And you care about precision. Okay, so that's 180 that side. I've just filed it up to what I think looks right. 186, see, that's a bit different. So I've got to take a bit of weight off there. So it looks good, but it measures a little bit wrong. There, 156. 153. So really I want a 157. I don't want that to start getting thicker from there. So I want, ideally, just all the way around. I want that all the same. So I'm going to get it all to, what was that bottom one? 153 or whatever it was, 152. So yeah, I'm going to reduce that and get it as thin as that all the way up to there. And then I'll let it increase a little bit there. Yeah, then obviously tapering up evenly right up to the top. So do the same and have a good looking perfect shank. File it flat before you do that, get it all nice and even. And then you'll end up with a nice quality piece. Obviously, have your ring buzzed out and nice and flat on the inside, otherwise your measurements mean nothing. I'm just filing it flat so I get that measurement I want, and then I'm going to round it off. There we go. 149, 151, 155, where'd that come from? Okay, right, so now I'm happy that bottom half is the same all the way around. I'm just going to round it off and get that side flat, perfectly even. You know, have you seen the ring stretchers, like an old-fashioned type? Kind of, you twist the handle to reduce and expand the measurement, and then you can put a ring shank in it. You can change the piece to make it different sort of shape Ds on the shank, so you can size a ring up by stretching it and rolling it around. That is a horrible tool for sizing rings. However, it is useful doing this. If I had one, I would just gently clamp it on there and just go, and I'll get that perfect edge both sides. I might have to get one of those because it saves you a lot of time. I get the measurement I want by filing, and then I just roll it around. Job done. Perfect D, and that flat both sides is absolutely spot on as well. Okay, what are we doing now? Just halfway up there. 2, 2, 3. Oh, massive that side. Alright, I'm reasonably happy with that. And you thought putting the shank on was going to be the easy, like, no-brainer bit. Still, everything takes a lot of care. So now, getting your stones out, double check it on the end, and then have a good look. With this one, I think I said it was like going to be right on the end of the shoulder. I'm going to have it just lapping into the collet a little bit. That should work out nicely, but yeah, I'm certainly going to get my stone out and then double check that. Putting the side claws on, I highly recommend getting a small ball phrase. Touching it where you want your claw to go. You may as well do both sides as your ball phrase is in your pendant motor. That's now your guide for your drill. It's important you don't slip, because if you slip and go down the side of the shank, you ballsed it right up. And you'd either have to file it right back and go thinner than you originally wanted, or solder it up and then it's just repaired and it's a balls up. So again, go into the center of the ring. Just drill it in a little bit. Go down like 1 mil, like 2 mil at the most. The way to ensure it doesn't slip is you let the drill spinning do the cutting. It's not about pushing hard. Okay, now that drill is really thin. So my next one is going to be, what was my claw wire? Again, I think it was like 1.2 or something. Yeah, 1.2. So now I'm getting a drill 1.2. What's that, 1.18? I'll do. Because if you just solder the claw on there with a little flat, it's not really going to be strong enough. I mean, I would get away with it maybe, because this is going for casting, and then when I get the casting back in gold, it's just obviously all one solid piece. But just to solder one on there from the end, and then having that claw pushed about for setting, I don't think it's strong enough. got your claws on, that's basically finished. So now let's tidy it up. Mine's for casting, so I've still got a bit of work to do, and you will too. You've got to tidy up your solder joins. It's not just that's ready to go now. It still needs a bit of work. Basically, you've put it together, but now you've got to really finish it off to get it to a higher level. So I just want to flatten off using that little stone cut-off disc thing I used. I was talking about earlier. These little cut-off wheels are good because you can take the metal off a piece without putting any pressure on it. If I was filing that, I have to put a lot of weight on it. Very, very likely to bend. I'm just going to flatten these just for the sake of neatness, get them both the same. Okay, so I'm leaving it at that. Next, rubber wheel. If you don't have these, get some. A hard rubber wheel, not the soft ones that just come apart as soon as you touch it. You want the hard ones, and you can get them really sharp. That's like a spinning blade now, and it will stay sharp for a little bit. And where these are good, any kind of rounded edge or little corner solder join, you can just what I do is I touch it in there, pull it back, and then cut down. That's really sharp now. And then do that on all your joins, and keep looking at the disc as well, because it will go blunt after a little bit. Sharpen it a bit more. This one's about half gone. When they're brand new, they seem to have a sort of extra hard shell, which is really good. And as they wear down, they get softer. Be extra careful when working on your claws. It takes a bit of practice to use these, but when you can do it, they're brilliant. Okay, right. Remember that little homemade whizzer thing I had after rubber wheeling? Touch it again with this. Try and show you a close up. So checking your surface finish, checking the symmetry. Are the claws all nice in a line? Look down on it. Is everything in a nice straight line? Parallel, are the claws parallel? Get your digital calipers. Double check your measurements. So let's go in between these. 2.6. 2.6, 1, 2, 3, that's close enough. I'll do this way. There to there, 5.73. Whoa, 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 whoa. 5.25, 5.26. Ah, that's quite different. 5.24. Let me hold it this way around. 5.2. 0.26, that's all right. Go around it, paper whizzers. Make sure there's no plier marks, hammer marks. All your measurements should be good all over. I'm going to wrap paper around a needle file and then just get in between there. Make sure there's no burrs in between the in the gap in the daylight hole. If you've got one, if underneath your side stones one gap looks slightly bigger than the other, totally permissible to get your saw frame in there and just zing it out a little bit. Just open up one side or the other, but bear in mind you're making it thinner. So certainly get the burrs out first and make sure it's not just those that are making it look kind of one-sided. Mine actually looks really accurate one side, and the other side, my left one, is a little bit of a tighter gap. But I think it's just burrs there. Yeah, it's alright. It's good. Reasonably happy with that. So there you go, the 3 stone. I hope you did a good job, and if not, do it again, because practice makes perfect. Thanks for watching, see you next time, bye.